Hi and welcome to Dynamics Update. Today is one of those interview episodes again, and with me as usual is of course Gustav Sundblad. Hello, Gustav.
Hello, Johan. How are you this evening?
I am fine this evening. It's a bit cold for being Swedish summer. It's been very warm a couple of days, and now it's really cold.
Now it's really
But
Swedish summer. It's
yeah,
14
so
degrees and
that's
raining.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why it's a bit fitting to get to talk to someone today who is actually somewhere where it's a lot warmer than in Sweden. So, Adrià, welcome to the podcast once again.
Thank you, Johan, and thank you, Gustav. Thanks for inviting me again. And you wouldn't believe it, but it's not sunny for the past few days, and it's not warm.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
When you say it's not warm, what does that mean in like degrees?
Yeah, of course. So it's like 23, 24,
Yeah, okay.
but it's been quite rainy.
I think we have 15 right now here
Yeah.
or something like that. So it's like, and we have had like 25 degrees this weekend. So it was really warm, and now it's really cold.
Yeah, I had to abort my youngest daughter's football practice yesterday due to hail coming down, and
Ooh.
but it's getting better. I hope we'll see. But no better time to sit inside and talk about dynamics, right? So, Adria,
Yes.
I mean, the reason you are here is not only because you are fantastic; it's also because you wrote a book, right?
Yes. So somebody proposed me, do you want to write a book about Power Platform and FNO? And I accepted. And then I immediately, you know,
Yeah, of course. But how long
I
ago
had to
was
write
it?
it.
When did you start?
So I first started drafting the first outcome of the book in March 2023. So I made an index of the chapters it would have, and then the sections of each chapter, and that's the starting point
Mhm.
before writing the book
Yeah, of
itself.
course.
Uh, and that was March, and I delivered the last first draft of the final chapter in December 2023.
Wow, that's pretty fast.
Yes. Well,
I mean, I have nothing to compare against, but I read the book, and it's a lot of content, and it has a lot of. I mean, it's not a thin, it's not like a manual. It's a very large book. It has a lot of sections. It covers. I mean, the topic is that something you thought of, or was it is something that is close to heart for you?
it was totally casual. So an editor at Pact contacted me about they had an idea about writing a book about Power Platform, extending finance and operations with the Power Platform, but they had no content, or so that's why I had to write first the I forgot it, the index of the
Yeah.
book, and uh, when they proposed it, I thought, I mean, it's a good idea. It's like it's what it's looking like for us. No, it's more Power Platform on the FNO side, and try to
Yeah,
extend it with FNO. And I thought it was a good opportunity, and that's why I accepted. And well, so yeah,
yeah.
after
So
8-9 months, a book was born.
the book was born. Yeah, but I think the most. I mean, the title of the book is as you said, it's extending Dynamics 365. It's a mouthful. Extending Dynamics 365 finance and operations apps with Power Platform, and it is a long time, but it is what it is. And I think it's the most amazing thing for me with this is it's from an F&O perspective, because you come from the F&O side, right? Because in all, we've been discussing this for a couple of years now. I mean, how important it is with the convergence and the Dataverse and moving to PPAC and a lot of stuff that's covered in the book. But like, you can't be just AX or F&O anymore. That's, if you do, you're gonna be run over by content in Dataverse. So it's very interesting to see a lot of these topics like Power Automate. all the tools and components available in Dataverse, but from an F&O perspective, because they are tools well within their own. You can do a lot of stuff without F&O, of course. But this is, and just correct me if I'm wrong, but I think all these segments here are from an F&O perspective, of course. I think that's the most interesting part for me, coming from an F&O side. But was that hard? I mean, did you spend more time trying out all the things in the book, or did you spend more time writing?
I have to say that it was quite from my point of view, it was quite straightforward, because I wrote the chapters while I was testing things. So I also, the book has a lot of images, because I found it hard to describe things without the screen captures, and that's why it has a lot of them. So I just started preparing the examples or the scenarios, like, so for example, deploying an environment that's connected to Dataverse, and I took the screenshots, then edited the word. It was not first do the things then right. It was both at the same time.
So that's what I really like as well, is that you do a very good job in actually illustrating the things that you write about. That there are like step-by-step guides for examples that you can do, which is, I think, is really good, because I mean, if you come from an F&O perspective, you might not be that familiar with how Power Platform works. So I think it's a really, really good point. And I would also like to say that one of the things that I really realized is that, because I mean, the question you get when you start talking about Power Platform and F&O is like, okay, so X++, I'm not going to do that anymore, right? But the thing is, which you highlight very well in the book as well, is that there are some things that are very well and easily done by X++, but there are also things that are very much, it's better to do them in Power Platform, because Power Platform, I mean, underneath F&O is still AX. It's still a fairly old platform. I mean, it looks flashy new, and there are new things coming in. But I mean, one of the examples you have is the approvals workflow. I mean, we have a workflow engines. We can build approvals in the workflow engine in F&O, but I would say that having them sent to Teams and email is probably better than having them in the F&O client.
Yes, and especially if you are waiting for an approval from somebody that maybe is not getting inside the UI of F&O, because that's the case. I mean, especially in big companies where they have too elaborate, in my opinion, workflows with many levels of approvals, especially when the amount of purchases or whatever is really high. There are some users that are not logging into the UI, so it's easier for them if they just get an email or a message on Teams. But well, we still need the workflow framework, because sometimes I've been asked, this example with the workflows on Power Automate is really useful, but can we somehow get rid of the workflow framework on the F&O side? And my answer is always no, because otherwise you would be building a new framework from scratch on Power Platform, because in the end, all the resources that are used in the book, there's this specific example of workflows, and with moving part of the workflow into Power Automate, not the workflows, but triggering the workflows in Power Automate through business events and sending emails and Teams messages. But still, those are using the workflow framework in F&O. And it would be a lot of work to replicate that or create something from scratch and all the approvals, and it's not worth it. So
Yeah, and I mean that for my part, one thing I also take away from the book and learning to embrace Power Platform and Dataverse in the last few years is that, like, where does it fit in? And you have a lot of useful scenarios and examples in the book. I'm going to come to AI Builder soon because that's one of my favorites. But it's all about like finding that specific use case where you can either enhance efficiency within workflow as a good example, because you still need maybe the rigidness of the workflow within F&O to handle approval limits and to handle, because you have your hierarchies within F&O, so it makes kind of legal sense to put it there. But you can handle all the other stuff like communication and routing the messages outside. You don't need to do that within F&O. Kind of interfacing to the modern workplace using Power Platform as a good use case as well. Another one that I just thought of with AI, because from my perspective, coming from F&O, it's always been like you could do a lot of cool demos. You could build like an inventory counting app, and you could do like an AI builder. I've had some cases before where you could train AI builder to take pictures or use pictures to enhance master data. Perhaps you could do measurements, or you can do stuff to enhance, but it's not doing a critical business process. It's just helping out in that critical business process that still lives within the ERP. So that's where I've seen it so far. But looking at your book now, I see a lot of examples where you can actually like embed the Power Apps using X++, back to X++, but you can use X++ to embed it properly, like without having to click all the buttons, etc. So you can really use those things. You don't need to build all the business logic in X++, but you can still rely on it to kind of interface to the more complex ERP components.
Yes, and for me, the problem with, for example, embedding Power Apps in F&O is finding a good use case. That's the hardest thing for me. As you said, it's really nice to make a proof of concept or a small demo where you have a embedded Power App, but maybe it's because I'm good at solving problems, but not at creating use cases or scenarios for demos. Maybe the problem is mine because I don't know which use cases we could have. But that's the hard part. But the integration is there, and we can use it even without X++. There's, you can embed them even as a workspace.
Absolutely.
But I think you touched on a very good thing before, because I usually joke that the fewer people who need to log into F&O, the better it is, because it is, I mean, objectively, it is a fairly complex UI. You need to know how it works. You need to understand where things are. With the search bar, it's easier, but it's still, I mean, there is still this wall of squares when you get in, and you need to understand which is which and where. So using Power Platform and especially Power Apps as a UI for F&O functionality, where, as you said, people who don't need to be in F&O, but they need to do like one or two small things, that is the perfect scenario for this. And when it comes to embedding things within F&O, the Power Apps within F&O, for data that isn't native to F&O, say CRM data, for instance, that's the obvious one, because you don't have to be in two different applications. If you usually do your work in F&O, then you can see the CRM data in F&O. And if you usually do your work in CRM, then you can see F&O data in CRM, because you can embed that way as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the use cases will come, as you say, Adrià. The use cases are there in the millions out there. I think a lot of people, I mean, I share your sentiment there. Usually Johan and I, we see the problems because they come like, we need to do this now. But the use cases are out there. And I think that's the main distinction with Power Platform, that it's not meant for technical developers, stuff like people like us. It's more for the power users out there, and God knows that they have use cases.
I think the problem is that you guys are used to X++. That means that X++ for you is the hammer, and that way everything is a nail. And in some cases it isn't a nail, but you treat it as one because that's where you're more comfortable doing changes than in Power Platform or in some other place.
Yes, and the thing is, I also see another limitation with Power Platform, or extending FNO with Power Platform, uh, and it's that it relies so much on eventing that either you start or you attach the Power Platform before a process starts or after it ends, and everything in between you have to do it with X++. And well, you said I'm an X++ developer, but I find it hard. So it's an ERP. We are posting ledger things and sales orders and transactions, and doing things with the Power Platform in between the transactions. We can't do that. That's the biggest limitation I see. But for example, it's very useful if you want to create a Power App for what you were saying, Johan. People that don't need to get into the UI, a salesperson with a Power App that shows, I don't know, the open sales orders of a customer or whatever. That's really useful. But when it comes to posting the sales order, leave it to X++.
Leave it to X++. Yeah, exactly. But that's really it. Like with dual write, and you can offset. You can even you can do with virtual tables, of course, as you also describe. And there are some, like the problem before when we were only X++ developers, we only had our hammer. That's what we had, right? So that was the solution to all our problems. Now it's kind of switched around. Now we have like 10 different tools to solve any particular problem. So we need to know about the tools, and we need to know about how they fit in. And I think there are like a ton of ways to do that. Specifically, like what you mentioned already, data capture and data like enhancement or enrichment. Those are scenarios where you really can save a lot of performance as well. If you do it right, you don't necessarily need to have the data in real time in FNO. You could do a lot of stuff there with the Power Platform, and just linking those environments, which is also a segment in your book, which is so. And now I don't have any. I would like to see statistics from Microsoft how many environments are not yet linked to Dataverse. I think the majority need to be at this point. They should be at least. But that's that's the first baby step that you have to take to start using all of these things. Even if you're not using CE, you still need to embrace the Power Platform.
Yes.
Yeah. Continue, please.
No, so it's what Gustav just said. It's you're not using CE, but now we have some functionalities on the Dataverse side. So the new Synapse link goes through Dataverse. These invoice capture apps or the BPA, that new workspace, it's also a model-driven app. So they are in Dataverse. So it's not important if you don't have a CRM in your project.
No, and then we haven't even mentioned the platform PPAC move to PPAC as well. That's another segment in your book. Like we say that, okay, this is for business people, it's for controllers, it's not, because we need to also understand how solutions work. We need to understand how environments are maintained, because that's where we poor LCS embracers need to move. No, I'm just kidding. I personally look forward to moving to PPAC, but that's another step. You don't need to know how a Power App works, but you need to understand how the Power Platform Admin Center works.
Yes. And, it's... on one side, I'm really looking forward to that and having everything on PPAC. On the other hand, the book became almost obsolete when it was published.
But that's only one segment, right? That's something else.
You need to do a version 2.
Yeah. Second revision.
I mean,
Yeah, but that has to be really complicated, writing technical books on in Azure, like in anything where it's an ever moving target, right? AX 2009, you published, you're done, and that's it. But now it's a moving target all the time. But I
Yeah.
think a lot of these things that you write about, like Power Automate, as long as they don't rebrand it from Power Platform to, I don't know, Mega Power Platform or something, then you should be safe.
Uh, well, that's also a thing. So I don't know if you remember last year during Dynamics Minds 2023, it was at the same time as Build, where all
Yeah,
the
exactly.
copilots were
And
released.
Fabric, yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yes, and I was writing the book, and I wrote the chapter on whatever. Now this has a copilot. Should
Yeah.
I rewrite the chapter? And it was like this for the 9 months that I was writing. And one of the technical reviewers that Cesar Garibaldo, that he works at Microsoft. So technical reviewers go through the chapter and just add some comments and recommendations, and he added the same to all the chapters. So uh, there's a copilot that does this and that, and I think it could be a good idea if you added this to the chapter. And I was like, I'm not reading. Oh, what's wrong with my eyes? I don't see that word. Because that, if I had done that, I don't think I would have published the book yet, because I would still be in rewriting hell.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially with Copilot, they're adding it to everything, and there will be a lot of content on Copilot anyway. So I mean,
Yes.
it's pretty much the same story. Not to like summarize Copilot here in one word, but it's also like in efficiency enhancement. Like it's helping you do your work, and it's the same. I look at a lot with F&O. Power Apps specifically in Power Automate, it's like it's not replacing X++, so it's not replacing ERP in any way. It's not going to take all of your workloads away from you. It's looking at things and trying to do it, like automate tasks that you do tedious. I've seen so many processes that rely on a poor person clicking on the same button for 2 hours, like the same day. It's like, I've always done this. Every Monday I do this for 4 hours. It's like that's where you really can go in with a surgical precision with the Power tool, like Power Automate, Power, it doesn't matter, and streamline. And I think that's the same with Copilot in a lot of senses as well. It helps you work more efficiently. It doesn't necessarily change dramatically what you do. It just changes how you do it.
Mm-hmm. There's that famous demo about a copilot for finance. I think it's the one on Excel.
Yeah,
I'm a bit
the other
mad,
one.
and I think we are all mad with the names.
Yeah.
Copilot for finance in finance. So it's the Excel one, and the demo that Microsoft always does is I really like that Copilot, because what they show is really useful. So they load data from open invoices and payments from a customer or a vendor, I don't remember. They match them and find if there is any missing, or why this year you had worse turnover, and this kind of thing. So that's really useful. But
Yeah, absolutely.
other copilots, I'm not going to say anything.
Not yet. No, but again, it's a helpful tool. I think one of the key takeaways from your book, and specifically what you mentioned in the beginning as well, just doing the index, like all of those topics, Power Automate, Power Apps, all of the topics. This is like a checklist of things that any F&O developer, functional consultant, anyone working within the realm of finance and operations need to be aware of this. They don't need to be experts on any of these subjects at all, but they just need to understand how it fits in and what it can do. Otherwise, we might still be trying to hit those nails with the hammer for many, many years, Johan, and I think that makes us kind of obsolete. So it's about using the platform and its capabilities to the best. That it can go to the other end of the spectrum as well. And as you said, let's not try to rebuild the workflow framework because we already have one. We can just make it communicate a little better. It's not like replacing stuff; it's enhancing them tools that are available.
Yes, and there is also one thing that you mentioned in the book is also around the the concept of decoupling. So being able to offload some of the development from
Yes.
the FNO project, because that is a complex one in itself, and also I would say that Power Platform and Power Automate is not as affected by Microsoft changes as things within FNO, because things within FNO directly affect our code. When we build things in Power Automate or in Power Platform, that's a developer platform that where we don't. I mean, of course, Microsoft can make changes to Power Platform that affect our code, but the whole point of the Power Platform is to run our code on it. So I think it's less likely for them to do major changes that breaks our code. But if you look at FNO, then they have code as well. So they of course prioritize their code within FNO because they think that's more important. So if that breaks our changes, our customizations, I think it's also an important part. So using it to keep the number of customizations down, I think is also an important part.
It's a very good use case.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and in the end, so it's just not decoupling, but also less downtime to deploy the tiniest change because you forgot a letter on a label, which that has happened.
No, never. No, of course. No, but that's another question I had as well. We had a segment on the ALM side, because that's always been kind of in the beginning of Power Apps as well. Like, how do we deploy it? Is there a deployment cycle, or do we have dev, test, prod? And to be fair, I mean, from the beginning of Power Apps, that wasn't really clear. We had a lot of different tools, but now it's become much better, right, with the whole environment setup. What is your experience working with, coming from an FNO side where it's very rigid with dev, test, SIT, UAT, etc.? How do we work with that in Power Platform?
So I remember the first time I did anything with the Power Platform, and in Dataverse you got this default environment, which Microsoft then says don't use it. It's just it has to be there. It's like the that company, right? And I did everything on the default environment because it's the default one. Why shouldn't I use this one?
That's where I end up without doing anything. So
yeah, and on that environment, I would create Power Automates that were connecting to UAT, to production, to development environments, and then then somebody from the CRM side came and said, "Okay, stop doing things." And well, the LAM part on the book is a bit, it's quite manual because there are pipelines right now for Power Platform that can help automate things. And in my case, because I haven't created very complex solutions, what I usually do is have a solution on the UA2, the development environment of Dataverse, where I add all the components, Power Apps or Power Automates, whatever, and then move that into the UAT and production environments. But I haven't yet experienced with the pipelines. And I think, well, because I love the pipelines on FNO. I love the pipelines. I love being able to automate things.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And well, the ALM solution that I present on the book is not very automated. It's quite manual, but it's the basis for automation later.
Yeah,
maybe so. If I do a second edition,
you can.
I'm not very sure about that. Maybe I should add it.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty funny because, I mean, we have not historically been known for our ALM in AX. So when I was looking at what's new and coming with the pipelines and stuff in Power Platform, I was like, we are finally ahead of someone in the entire world. It's not due to our own because Microsoft dragged us kicking and screaming into something that we didn't want to do first of all, but it ended up fairly well. We ended up in a situation where we have an ALM situation that I think is a good one. It's rigid enough so that we can force people to work in a certain way. I like that as well. So now when you see something that doesn't have that rigidity to it, then you realize that, okay, so maybe we have it fairly well where we're at the moment.
Yeah, I remember. So I started working with AX in 2010, but my first contact was in 2008 in the university. While so it was a summer course on Axapta, and until the year 2016, I think. So in 8 years, I saw not a single project using source control on Dynamics. Source control were comments. And I remember being at the training for upgrade to FNO for developers. And the source control thing, what's this? What do you mean? We are not doing comments anymore. it was like upgrading myself also as a software developer, because
Yeah.
the source control, that's for GitHub people that do whatever.
Who needs it? No, but on the other hand, ARP has always been like it needs to be rigid because it's so like production critical, right? So it's strange that it's taken so long to get to that point from the code base perspective, but from a deployment perspective, it's always been critical and rigid, at least in a well-run project, I would say. So that's another aspect to exactly. There are many not well-run projects, of course, but that's another aspect to take into account in the ALM here, that you need to coordinate these things with the CE team in case you run a CE, because they also run their operations in the same environment that you deploy. If you have any connection to FNO, that is, you need to make sure that you have a connection to the same CE. So it just requires you and me. When speaking of Dynamics Minds 2023, we had this slide with ERP plus CRM equals heart, because you need to kind of bridge the teams together, regardless if you do CE or just Power Platform. You can't work in silos. You need to be working as a team.
Yeah. I thought it was a bit fascinating when I started with FNO and AX. I came from the infrastructure side where everyone started doing PowerShell scripts and things, and the last rage was to have everything in GitHub, because that's how everyone did it, even though you were just one person who did things. And I came to the AX side, and they were like, no, we don't do source control unless we're like 20 developers. And I'm always fascinated when one side of the fence says this is absolutely right, and the other side of the fence says the other way is absolutely right.
Yeah.
Because someone has misunderstood something here, and I'm fascinated in trying to figure out how and who and what.
Never a better time to embrace those things than now, with all the tools that we have. Now we just need to do that final push into PPEC, and then we're all in the same place together. And we just need to learn to sing along and work along together and coexist. But I mean, it's all about exactly, and to understand each other's strengths from a platform perspective. I mean, of course.
Yep. So the thing is, I'm not sure, but I think we didn't even mention the title of the book in the beginning.
Yeah,
you did.
We did.
Okay,
but we can mention it again. I think it's extending Dynamics 365 finance and operations apps with Power Platform. The subtitle is how to integrate Power Platform solutions to maximize the efficiency of your finance and operations projects. And it's out now on Pact Publishing. That's on Amazon, I think, as well. I think you can order it from any online publisher, I would imagine.
No, that's a bit interesting. I mean, from my point of view, the book is actually printed on demand. So if you buy a copy for example, the first copy from the book that I got. I bought it on Amazon in Spain and was printed in France. Then I got the author copies that were printed in the UK. And I know people from the United States that got the books printed in Texas.
Oh,
So
cool. All right, so that's
interesting to learn.
Yep.
Cool. They have publishing outlets. Very cool. But it was a pleasure to have you here, Adrià, and it's a very fascinating book. And it's, at least, as I said, it's a very good checklist to go through of all the topics that you need to be aware of. And if you find something that you really want to deep dive into, the tools are available to you now.
Yep. All right. So thanks, Adrià, and hope to see you back at the podcast again.
Sure. I will be here if you ask.
Yep.
For version,
Always
version
enjoy.
2. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you, Adrià. Pleasure to have you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.